Welcome to the debut episode of The Social. It's your host, Jay. Today I have a dope guest with me by the name of Troy Hutler. What's happening, bro?
What's up with y'all?
We were just talking about it before, I turned the mic on. And, thank you so much for coming on and participating in this, man. We got some really dope topics. The objective of the podcast is to address social justice issues, come up with ideas and solutions to getting things done and being progressive and moving forward. So thank you for, volunteering to be a part of this, of course, man, and impacting the culture.
Oh yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, for sure. So, with all that being said, let's get straight to it. So,
Yes,
let's
sir.
kick it off with lately, obviously, with the another shooting of another black man, the Jacob Blake situation, right? I think right now, the country, not even just the country, because the issue was global, right? I think it's just we live in such a hateful world, right? Because even with the shooting and all that, people want to bring up turmoil in someone's past and kind of use that against them to justify the shooting and other things that have been going on towards black people. For we say it's 400 years, but let's be honest, it's been going on significantly longer than 400 years. It's been such a strong resistance to me against progression. So I'm very curious about your perspective on that.
I think to kick it off, I would definitely say we live at some eye-opening times.
Right.
I think if you follow scripture, I don't know if people are religious or not.
Right.
I myself have a lot of questions. So just based off of what I've read in scripture and stuff, is like, I believe the awakening and the apocalypse are one and the same. You know
Mm.
what I mean? I feel like if we get to the base of the word apocalypse, you know what I'm saying? If you really look up the textbook definition of it, it means awakening. You know what I'm saying? So I think people are finally opening their eyes, speaking for, white people and using their voice, whereas before people's eyes were open to this, but nobody was really trying to put words to actions. You know what I'm saying? So now we got this big uproar because of all the media attention, Black Lives Matter has garnered, and the movements that have struck up all across the United States and shit, the globe at this point. You know what I mean? So I think we are at a very controversial time in our history, but I think this is, like you said, a very good means towards progression. And I think a lot of the topics that need to be spoke on are uncomfortable. People aren't going to really open up to the idea of, a new age thinking right away. We as human beings tend to live in our comfort zones, because it's safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think, with everything coming to light, and in a recent, Jacob Black shooting, let's use that for example. Jacob Blake, I'm sorry. We have a gentleman who presumably called the police for an altercation between two females in his neighborhood. Okay.
Okay.
At this point in time, the police come out, and the video surfaces on the internet. What happened before this video, we don't know. All we know is that this man, presumably being unarmed, you seen no weapon in the video, was shot 7 times in his back, right in front of his children. I think that speaks volumes of the police in this, in this country. Given everything that's happened over these past few months, they still feel as though they have that power to do, to be the judge, jury, and executioner.
Absolutely.
I believe we have a judicial system for a reason, and regardless of whatever one's past might be, I'm not condoning it. I'm not hating on it, whatever, bro. But at the same token, we have a judicial system for a reason.
But see,
Even though it tends to fail us, sometimes it's still in place for
I'm
a good
glad.
reason.
I'm glad you brought up the judicial part of it, right? A lot of people don't understand. I think a big part of why these cops are not held with accountability, right? And you see that across the board, right? Through, whether it be politicians, just throughout our government, right? What people fail to realize or aren't aware of is that there are these unions that are protecting these officers and things like that. And I think that that's problematic, right? Typically, a union is to be beneficial to an employee, whatever branch of work they may serve. right? In these situations, that is not the case. It's to lessen the, part of accountability placed upon these cops. And I think that has led to a lot of frustration, and not even just the black community. And I do think that that's part of the beauty in the situation, is that there is such a strong sense of unity across all different communities, right? Whether you be
Right.
of black, black descent, white,
Latino, right?
Latino,
Yeah.
all that. You see so many different cultures, so many people of different ethnic backgrounds coming together to fight the ignorance, to fight the hate. I think at the same time, the resistance comes from, it's obviously racist people out there. The
Oh, of
resistance
course.
seems to be coming from media as well. Because throughout the situation with the Jacob Blake shooting, right, there has not seemed to be any solidified things to be said through media to show a sense of accountability. You know what I mean? Like, I just haven't seen where, and obviously the police have to do better. If a person is walking around with a highly volatile weapon, right? The weapon was illegal, and this is someone who even said that they wanted to be an officer, and it's just like no standards have been set again because of the lack of accountability. But then you have unions protecting these people. You have different things going on like this. There's resistance from cops, from All Lives Matter, from racist and ignorant people. But media plays such a strong role in this because there is a lack of information being shared. What do you think about that?
I definitely think, it was good that you touched on the union aspect of it. And I'm going to put this in your mind, just speaking from a business standpoint only. Unions, are going to protect their assets, which is their employees.
Oh, of course.
Okay. And I think that's, a big part of the reason why we need to get rid of the immunity these cops have in these cases. And they need to be tried as citizens and not officers of the law, because obviously we're at a point in time where police think they are above the law and above the things that they're out here enforcing. You see it every day. They pulling people over for being on their phones, and whole T they be on their laptops taking radar and all that.
Right.
So I think like you said, accountability plays a huge role. I'm not going to condone I'm not going to condemn the entire police force. I personally happen to know some very respectable officers. But again, with that being said, a bad apple on a tree, kind of ruins the whole tree. So you gotta look at, you can't have a crew of good pilots and have one bad pilot and be like, oh, this only happens every once in a while. It's only a couple hundred people that die when the plane crashes.
Right.
Like that can't happen. So why is it, being allowed to happen within, our blue community, so to speak. So I really am curious to see how things go playing forward, because I do believe that, change is being made, and I believe that, people are finally unifying to make that change. And as you spoke on it, from all creeds and backgrounds and nationalities, and I think the day we realize the power we have together, instead of, the power that we think we have divided, or, the power in division,
Right.
is what the narrative the media spews, because, as well as I do, if they put out the truth, and you didn't have two opposing views on the same situation coming through the news, and you're going to have the view of whichever station you're watching.
Right.
I think that's what it boils down to, is just coming together and searching for the truth.
Well, see, and that's where I mentioned the news, right? Because I watch it. I cannot watch it every single day because of the fact that it's too consistently a false narrative being shared about different situations and things like that. Again, we're living in a time now where with, the different, pieces of technology that we have literally in our pockets, in our homes and things like that, everywhere we go at our disposal, I feel like the information that we receive should be greater. You know what I mean? And I feel like the perspective should be consistent. Again, we are humans. So we could literally be in the same room right now and someone comes in acting crazy, wanting to fight. You are going to say something more than likely with slightly different detail than I am going to give out, right? So,
Right.
because your angle, your perspective is not going to be the exact same as mine. You could be on the other side of the room. So, you're going to hear something different. You're going to see it start different. So,
Yep.
in that way, I get it. However, when that is consistently the case on so many of the same issues and topics, and I think it's also the approach, right? One of my favorite shows that I watch is called American Gods. One of my favorite characters is Anansi. I believe he's played by Orlando Bloom or whatever his name is. I can't remember, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
he says one of his signature lines in the show is, I believe it was season 2. He says, "White people are perceived as inherently good. So when they commit a crime, it's perceived as a good person doing a bad thing. Black people are perceived as inherently bad. So when they do something, it was only a matter of time before that animal loses control and goes to his primitive state." And I thought that that line was just so powerful because it shows not only the perception of a black man, right, through media and people's actual eyes, because you see how the police approach us and things like that. I just think that that line resonates so much. It's troubling that that is the situation because for the most part, people who come across a lot of black people do not have these situations. I think that media has so much more influence and there's no regulations on what is pushed out to the public and things like that. The reason I had mentioned that line is because in a time like this, right, in a show like that, a black man was speaking on how white people perceive black people, right? I also see a level of ignorance and negligence towards black people from black people. When a shooting like the Jacob Blake one occurs, right, you would think that a lot of black people would be sympathetic. Instead, you see a lot of black people mentioning black on black crime as if the issue of proximity does not occur in all cultures and in different locations, right? I'm trying to figure out how to get past that because when the shooting happened, the first thing that came to my mind is because I've constantly seen it over the summer, over the course of the year, where it's like, okay, when a black on black crime happens, the first thing that someone will say is, until we start respecting ourselves, how will someone white do it? And I feel like that perspective is ignorant. I feel like it takes pressure off of the racist, systematic things that we deal with on a consistent basis. So being on the outside looking in, I'm curious about your perspective on that as well. The notion of white people won't respect us until black people do. I think it's a very ignorant mindset. I think it's counterproductive, and it allows for things like this to continue happening in a sense.
I'll definitely agree. It's counterproductive. I'm like I said, I'm on the outside looking in, and I see good people and I see bad people, right? And that doesn't mean that I'm taking away from them as people. That doesn't mean I'm demeaning them for, or taking away from who they culturally or traditionally are, okay? That just is me stating, in this world we have good people and we have bad people, right?
Right.
So at the end of the day, when evil is present, okay, and we see it, all across the board, all the way from the highest paid people all the way down to the slums, right? We see evil everywhere, right? So when you have that constantly in your face, okay, when that is constantly being broadcasted to you and constantly being programmed subconsciously into your mental, you are going to inherit those same views, right? You're going to inherit those same things that were constantly beaten into you, constantly put into your head,
Right.
And I think we're at a point in time now where this has been brushed under the rug for so long that in certain parts of the country, you didn't necessarily run it across. It wasn't as blatant. I'm speaking on racism and things of that sort. Right. It wasn't as blatant. You know what I mean? And I think that's really what helped Black Lives Matter garner a lot of steam was because these things were happening in all sorts of different places, you know, and it was the same narrative that was happening in all these different places. And people finally realized, okay, we have a problem. Okay. And we need to do something about this now. I think the problem's been known about, right, you know, but I think the solution part of the problem has been shaky because, again, we're not unified. We're not standing together on this topic. You know, we're constantly at each other's necks with excuses instead of solutions.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And I think that plays a big part in people's mentality, man. This shit, you know, you turn on the news, you watch the news, it's all negative, man. Like,
very true.
And when you push this negativity, you know, let's say somebody goes to work, they hate their job, right? Mm-hmm. It's negative all day. They get home, they watch the news. What's the first thing they see? More negative shit, right?
Right.
So now you're training your subconscious to produce negative thoughts. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And that comes from a battle from within, from yourself. Okay? So once you inherently get those thoughts and you have them within yourself, now you're at war with yourself. How can you find a solution to an outside problem when you're at war with yourself? You know, and I think that can be said across the board. That's not just, you know, directed to black people, white people. You know, that's not directed towards one set of people. That's across the board. You know what I mean? And I think when we realize, you know, the power our brains hold, you know, and the power of our mindsets and our mentality, if we don't allow this shit to happen, it won't happen. You know, not to say it won't happen ever, but it won't happen as frequently. You know, if we held people accountable for the shit they did, mm-hmm, you know what I'm saying? And made what's the word I'm looking for here? Made why is it jumping off my tongue right now? Anyway.
Well, okay, so let me guide it a little bit more, right? So you made some great initial statements about...
Make an example of someone. There you go.
Okay. So with that, so you made some great points, again, about accountability. Because at this point, that is one of the key priorities for this, forget just this country. Again, this is a global issue, right? You have to have a sense of accountability across the board. With that accountability comes consistency, right? So when you mentioned, you know, the points that you've mentioned about Black Lives Matter, when I mentioned the quote from the show American Gods, when I speak on the perspective of blacks on black crime, which I hate the very notion of, because there is no such thing as black on black crime. You've never heard on Asian crime, white on white crime on the news. You don't hear that.
Right, right. No, I agree with that.
Because it bothers me, because it's almost like you can't say Black Lives Matter, but then you say something like that, which kind of defeats the purpose of it. When you say, as a black man or a black woman, that other cultures will not respect us until we do, that again, it's just so counterproductive. I think it shows a lack of education and commitment to finding solutions. And you don't hear that in our generation, Troy. What you hear that in is the older generations, right? Who pretend as though these same exact issues were not just as prevalent and worse. We're not going to act like there weren't larger war on drugs issues going on, right? Like, if we're being honest, it's almost as if previous generations refuse to accept responsibility for their role in this and do something now and being active in a solution. I think we have had the most forward-thinking generation in centuries, is what it is. Part of it is, yes, we have more awareness because of the technology. They didn't have that. I just think that even with that, again, it is a strong sense of unity. But just as much as there is unity, there is resistance. Again, because ignorance will always be around, because there are just some people who refuse to educate themselves, empower themselves and each other, right? And so that leads me into the thinking of because people are ignorant, and it's voting season essentially, right? I am very interested in seeing how people are going to leverage what's going on with the racial injustice things to get elected. Does that not concern? It for sure is a concern for me, considering already the options that we have, who we know are we're gonna be ultimately picking for, right? Like we aren't going to get a liberal president. It's going to be either Democratic or Republican. So I'm very curious about now your thought process on, because that's something that's clearly crossed my mind. I'm just very interested in seeing how someone is going to leverage what has been going on with the racial injustice issues going on.
You know, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Because we are in a very pivotal season. You see it every election year. You know what I mean? You see issues at hand being used to garner votes, being used to sway opinion. So I think we really need to be diligent in the next couple months, and really take things in logically and not so much emotionally. I feel like as far as this year has gone, it's been a very emotional year. And I think everyone feels that, you know, and, you know, if you don't feel it, then you must be living under a rock. You know what I'm saying? So I think, you know, moving forward, it's great that you brought up the topic of, you know, our generation being more diligent and more progressive thinking. So I would really like to challenge, you know, the older generation to really lead the way. I mean, and that's kind of, you know, a backwards way of thinking also. But at the same token, they do have a lot of knowledge on topics and things that we were not alive to see, you know. So exactly. I think people you know, that were here before us, and, you know, there have been people, let me not put it on everybody, you know, that have stood up, you know, and spoke and, you know, gave their life for this cause, you know what I mean? But at the same token, I feel like over time, people have been programmed to not see this, right? Think about the effects movies have. Think about the effects, you know, comedy has, or think about the effects of, you know, all these different forms of entertainment and media that we're exposed to. A lot of the things that were very offensive many years ago are now joked about. You know what I'm saying? So I think that in itself is inherently wrong. Because then you breed a sense of people being okay with, you know, certain behaviors or certain viewpoints. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it really needs to change from the top down, man. We need to collectively, you know, stand together, garner the information we can from the folks that live through these type of things. You know what I'm saying? And saw them firsthand at a different time frame. You know, because we can learn a lot from the past. You know, and a lot of people, you know, sometimes you got to see where you've been to know where you're going. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's a big thing. And especially with it being election season, like, this is a very scary election for me. And it's on both sides, you know. I think we need to realize, you know, that these parties, political parties, are not for the American people. They aren't connected to the average ordinary person. No. You know what I'm saying? A lot of these people were born into wealth, you know, or haven't been, you know, middle class or poor in a very long time. You know what I'm saying? So they're on the outside looking in on how to come up with solutions on these topics, right? So I think we really need to start addressing it at the top level. And you've seen how that's gone with our current, you know, head of state. And, you know, I think he pushes things in the wrong way. And to this point, I can't say it's not intentional because it's been that way for the past 4 years, you know. So, you know, I have mixed feelings on this election. To be honest, at this point, I might go third party, you know, me personally. But I really can't see myself going blue or red this year, man. I can't. You know, in last election, it was, you know, the same thing, you know. So I'm really curious as to, you know, how the next few months play out and how they try to flip certain things to work in their favor. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So what? Now I want to address two different things, right? So what you just said about going either blue or red. I used to be under the perception that you should place your vote. Again, it's your vote, and I'm explaining this in the sense to let you know that I have changed my mindset because I've gotten older. My
Mm-hmm.
mindset used to be, if the third party is not going to have a chance of winning, why put your vote there, right? Why not place your vote towards something or a candidate that is going to essentially be one of the two top options? As if I've gotten older and have done my research and have developed as a man, I'm now seeing it from this perspective, right? Looking at the candidates representing both Republican and Democrat and knowing the history of both parties now, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
I encourage, and we've talked about this before, but I encourage more people to do their due diligence and going and researching both, the creation of both parties, seeing how they started, because there's the perception amongst black people in particular, because a lot of people don't understand. You don't really ever decide your political affiliation. It typically goes by what family you were born into. So the Democratic Party is predominantly black respected, right? Whereas the Republican Party is identified as a particularly white represented party and preferred, right?
Right,
And
right,
so what I was saying before is just the black vote typically goes to Democrats. And seeing the two candidates and growing as a man and changing my perception, what I realized is in this situation, you're picking between, well, who's the lesser of two evils? What you have to understand is you are still picking an evil. So
right.
whereas
Exactly.
before I was saying, if you're gonna vote, put your vote towards one of the two candidates and you pick the lesser of two evils. But again, you're picking an evil. I am so much more understanding now of why people vote third party. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
so don't be as misinformed and as miseducated as I was 4 years ago or however long ago. I'm not gonna say who I voted for. I think people understand where I stand. But don't make the mistakes that I also made. Yes, I'm also a very young guy. I just turned 25. But I said all that to say is place your vote where you are most comfortable. But please vote. Just vote
Oh yeah,
wisely.
please get out and vote, people.
Yes, but
And
vote
please
wisely.
do your research on policies that these people want to implement. There's a lot of things that get brushed under the rug, and due to legal jargon,
Mm-hmm.
that unless you really looked up the words,
Yeah.
you can misconstrue it for something else. So all I'm saying is, before you go, mail in your vote, definitely do your research, man. And this is one, as all the rest before this
Mm-hmm.
were one for the books, man.
Yeah.
So we gotta get it together, and these people obviously ain't gonna do it for us. So we gotta, let our voice be heard, and the way to do that is on the ballot.
Exactly. And with that being said, I want to lead that into the second aspect of what I was saying, right? So, again, while voting for the president is important, please, please, please do your research on who you are putting in positions of power as it pertains to Congress, Senate, because that's where the actual power is. That's where laws get reviewed, passed, things like that. Again, the policies that you mentioned.
Yes,
So
sir.
make sure, because the president ain't nothing but a face, right? You know what I mean? Like, that can be replaced. These policies that are implemented last much longer than a presidency, right?
Yes, sir.
So be informed on that, be informed on solutions, and know how to properly apply pressure. Understand who's supporting who, understand how politics legitimately work. Because a lot of people don't understand, it's a lot of dirty money, things like that, that go into politics. It's not about the best candidate. If that was the case, we would not have had some of the previous leaders that we had, right? The best person does not represent the whole as it should. So be aware of not only your president, but people in Congress, Senate. Do your due diligence. With that being said, it also takes me
Yeah,
into,
even your
because
local representatives to add on to that, man.
absolutely on all levels, again, accountability. So you have to go through each piece of the structure and look at who you like best. It isn't going to be perfect, but you have to find something that's going to give us some consistency and some progression going forward. That's the whole purpose of what we're talking about on this podcast, is again how to contribute to the progression
Yes,
and
sir.
addressing the issues that are going on. So something that I referenced earlier was how, in these runs, right, people are going to start leveraging these things. The one thing that I just cannot stand about this time of year is that I haven't heard anything from these candidates to suggest why they should be reelected or be even considered to be up for a term next, right? Typically, they wait till about a year, maybe about 8 to 6 months before they start getting really active with putting ads on TV, bashing each other, things like that. It
Yeah.
made me think again of like how people are leveraging things. I'm curious as to how we as a people, not just black people, but as a community of humans trying to get some solid foundation going here, how are we going to start leveraging our power, right? Because what you see is a lot of businesses going under because of the virus, different things like that. I think that these major corporations are thriving. I want to see how we get the right people, the right businesses. How do we get them in power? How we get them thriving? You know what I mean?
I think it all starts, within us. We got to make that change, and that starts with each individual. And I'm glad you brought up, businesses struggling due to COVID and communities struggling due to, police brutality and issues that are plaguing communities. Let's look at Michigan, who hasn't had clean water for going on 10 years.
Ridiculous.
So I think we should really start to examine the infrastructure of what our society was built on and get back to our roots as human beings. Let's start looking out for our neighbors. We live in a time where people are getting snatched out their front yards. You know what I'm saying? So let's really start being diligent within our communities. If you can offer help, no help's too small. Even just being out and conversing with people and keeping a positive vibe in everything you do, it works wonders, man. It really does. And I think that's where we start. We got to start rebuilding our communities instead of trying to top lift from the top down, because the top don't care about us. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the average American is not in the top's mindset, okay? You got to think these people are the 2%. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we got to really, look at things like that as well. And we live in America as well. We live in one of the most prosperous nations, and higher qualities of living, okay? Mm-hmm. And I think we've gotten away from that as a society because we got comfortable, right? There's a lot of things that make our life easier. We don't have to grow our own food no more. We go to the grocery store. You know what I'm saying? We don't gotta cook dinner every night. We can go out to eat. So
yeah.
I think little things like that has dehumanized us in a way. And to go back on the point I made earlier with all the negativity being pushed in our face, and it's real easy to point fingers. It's real easy to make excuses for these problems and not solutions to these problems.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, like I said, it starts with us, man. And the more we talk about it, the more that you voice, your opinion and back it with fact, the more people have to listen, and if they don't listen, well, it's not up to you to save everybody. You can only speak your truth, and whoever, is touched by your light, then that's who you keep with you, so you really gotta just keep on moving, and I think that's one thing we have to really get better at is, being out and active in the community and being more open to each other and each other's viewpoints, even if they don't agree with our own. As long as the respect is kept, you know what I mean, and things can be talked about in a constructive manner, I think a lot of these conversations are going to be very uncomfortable.
But see, that's
does that
where
mean that they need need to turn to disrespect and violence. No, they do not. You know, and so I think we need to really take a step back and rethink everything from within ourselves and start branching that light outwards. You know.
But see, what you just said with just like pointing the fingers at different people and things like that, and just in the way that we have conversation, I think part of the problem and part of the frustration is that it feels like the conversation has now become redundant. We are so aware of the issues. It doesn't mean that the conversation should stop, but I think at this point it's more so, from my perspective and the way that I'm perceiving it, and I feel like other people in the community are perceiving it, it's just we've known what the issue has been for centuries. We fought it for decades.
Right.
At what point is the change gonna start? Because we have been under the illusion of change, right? Had it not been for social media and things like this, could you imagine how much worse the shootings, the stab, all these things would have been, right? Something that we have not gotten the opportunity to talk about is just how disgusting and how much this predatory thing has gone on with, like you said, people getting snatched out of their homes, out of their front yards, things like that. The police is part of the problem. When you put it in perspective, the fact that every 30 seconds a young black woman, whether she be dark skinned, light skinned, whatever the case may be, a black woman of any shade is getting snatched every 30 seconds. And we're not even talking about the children. It's
Right.
so much wrong with this country, and it's like we don't have the answers, in part because we don't even know what questions to ask. You know what I mean? Like I
That was
think
powerful,
it's
bro. That was
so.
powerful.
I think it's we really. What do you do? And it hurts. It's bothersome. I think what made it helpful and was what made it better is that we had people like you from different cultures, ethnic backgrounds, communities, really active and really wanting change because you all see the same thing that we do. The value in the next person.
Oh
Something
yeah,
that I am
for sure.
so
At the
grateful.
end of the day, we all on this planet together, man. You know,
Absolutely.
and whether we like somebody for what they look like or not, I mean, we going through the same. I wouldn't say the same shit, but we going through life. You know what I'm saying? We're all on this ride called life. You know, and I think the more we realize that we're all in this together, the more we can see how similar we actually are. And I think that's where, a lot of the concern from the higher ups come in. And I think that's why a lot of these things are so heavily pushed down our throat, because they do see the unity and they're scared. You know what I'm saying? So I think, we are on the verge of a big change in America. Now, whether that's going to be negative or positive, or going to take negative to get positive, I'm not so sure, I think things are definitely going to get ugly before they get better, but I think as long as we stay open to finding solutions, we can cut down on the ugly. You know what I'm saying? So I think, to go off your point, like, we got to continue to use our voices, and continue to speak on these topics that people don't want to speak about. Because that's the only way, they're going to get people. You just said something about not knowing which questions to ask. Well, we all got a piece of the puzzle, that somebody else might not have. So I might ask a question that sparks the answer in your mind. You know what I'm saying?
Wow. That's deep, man. And I think just the message behind us having this conversation, I think hearing the frustration, and that's something that I really want to get into next, because being young for us, seeing these issues and how it bothers us and how it's gonna clearly bother the next generation, because this issue is not going to be fixed anytime soon because of the infrastructure of this country. It is the ignorance, the hate, the racism. It is layered so deep into the foundation of this country. Literally, the origins of America, not the native land. You know what I mean? Like it's so heavily rooted. So it's just, how do we get this toxic crap out? I mean, as long as there's humans and free will, and with anything good, there's gonna come bad. It's just, it gets, after a while, I think like you said, the 2020 has been an emotional year. I think it's been more than that. I think it's been a year, not even of spiritual tests. It's almost like this year was designed to break people. You know, you spoke earlier about the apocalypse and the meaning of it, and at the core of it. But it's just, I don't know. I again, like getting into these conversations, it just takes you to another place mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and stuff like that. But having a brother from another culture and community see it from your perspective, and trying to be someone who gives conclusive or trying to contribute to an answer and help you finding the right questions. I think that there's a beauty in that. I think that there's, in a way, some servitude there to man, and to just so many different things, right? I'm thankful for you coming on and having these conversations with me. Hopefully we can get on and have more, but we're gonna wrap it up there, man. So thank you so much, bro. If you want to
Yeah,
promote any
thanks
of
for
your social
having me.
media
You
or
know,
anything.
as always, man, I really appreciate it. And like I said, anytime you want to hop on this, man, just give me a shout, because these things need to be talked about. And I think a lot of people are scared to talk about them because they don't want to be taken the wrong way. But I know when you set good intentions on what you have to say, it can't be taken the wrong way.
Absolutely.
So I think with that being said, we need to also be wary of, the wolf in sheep clothing. So,
Very
but
true.
like I said, I encourage everybody go vote. Everybody go, make sure you do your research on these candidates, and do it locally, state, and federally. Let's really bring on this change, and that's the only way we're gonna get it.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, bro. If you want to go ahead and promote any of your social media or anything like that, why don't you go ahead and run through that? Links will also be in the description, so if you want to go ahead and shout yourself out, go ahead and do that, bro.
Yeah, man, you can follow me, Facebook. My name is Troy Hudler. You can hit me on Instagram, 3_Veritas. I appreciate you for your time, man.
Appreciate you for coming on, man. Follow me on the gram at o.s_AEKO. Links will be in the description. Welcome to the Social Podcast, man. I really appreciate you guys for joining us and listening. I hope this empowers people and gives people a platform to come out and give a message of positivity, some solutions to the issues that we're facing. Love y'all. Be safe. Peace.